Welcome to User Friendly 2.0 with host Bill Sikkens, Technology Architect.
And this is User Friendly 2.0. Welcome to this week's show. Bill, Gretchen, welcome.
Hello.
So we're going to be having an interesting conversation today in the second segment for those that are interested in retro computing. And from the feedback we've been getting from you, and please keep it coming at userfriendly.show, it seems like there's been a lot of interest in this. So it's going to be a fun topic to talk about, basically where processors started and memory and that type of a thing. And I promise I will not do it in monotone, I think.
Really? Bueller?
Yes. And if we get a copyright match on that, well, it happens. So we have our show on YouTube now as well. We're going to be talking about that towards the end of the month. I want to get a little bit of content up there first, but I see that we have a few of you that have found it. So let us know what you think. But yes, I'm noticing and starting to understand the whole YouTube content creator complaint about copyright matches. It is definitely a challenge. It's one thing, I understand why they do it, because you don't want people to just, steal intellectual property and that kind of thing. But it is extremely strict. Your Bueller thing, Gretchen, could possibly trigger a copyright strike. And I don't think it will, but, that's kind of how this comes down to. So.
Yeah, but I don't have that actor's voice, so, it really shouldn't.
It shouldn't, but that doesn't mean it doesn't. And, I figured out one other thing, too, on a different show I was working on. I was a guest a while back, and we were live streaming, and not me, but one of the other guests had a football game on in the background, just running in the ambient thing. Oh boy. I thought they were going to send like authorities to the guy's house and arrest him or something. The screen went red. It stopped the streaming and, gave this warning that you will be bestraft. If you're German, you'll know what that word means. But it's kind of crazy. So anyway, new platform for us. You don't have to see our mugs, though. It's a visualizer, but from the feedback we're getting so far, it's been enjoyed. It's kind of cool to be on a new platform. So we'll keep you up to date on that as we get closer to it. And we weren't going to talk about it much, except that I have been seeing you are already there. So welcome to that platform. What do we have in the news this week?
All right. Star Wars costumes for Halloween are back.
Now, when I first saw this in here, I'm like, well, okay, so what? But there is a so what to this. And Gretchen, why don't you tell us a little bit about why this is special?
Okay. Well, all right. Many years ago, when we were doing cosplay and having fun, we would sometimes run into situations where, I don't have a piece for this costume, especially Star Wars. And sometimes you could go to like the Halloween stores, like in this case, I think it's Spirit Halloween.
Yeah.
Where you could go and find some pieces that would enhance your costume so that you could get it completed. So this was always a normal thing that we could count on. And then, bam, disappeared. No more Star Wars stuff. And then the next year and the next year, it was like Star Wars had died. And it was kind of sad and depressing. But this year, we have Star Wars again available. I guess it was the Mandalorian and Grogu and Dave Filoni that's made Star Wars come back to life.
And changes in leadership at Disney. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that might be Dave Filoni. Isn't he sort of now in charge? Or is he sharing control?
I have not seen an announcement to that effect. I hope that's where it goes, though. And Dave Filoni is brilliant, in my opinion. And, you are starting to see a difference with all this. I know some of the costume clubs were also having problems with some respect due to...
Well, they disappeared, too.
Yeah.
Like, you go to events, and I was like, where's the 501st? They're gone.
Yeah.
It was like, what happened to these people? It was like, they were fun.
Yeah.
And so it feels like... And the toys are coming back. And it's like, hey, we have something to be excited about again. And I'm like thinking, oh, cool. Maybe I can get my Star Wars stories published. And so it's like, there's a new hope.
I do
Literally.
hope. Well, there you are. They're not going. Yeah. No, they actually do have quite a selection of costumes. Spirit Halloween, and they're not the only one. I've seen them on Amazon and other places like that too. So they're definitely around. And some of them look pretty good. The adult Grogu is a little weird. In my opinion.
Sure. Some of them are weird, but it might take them a little time to get back into
things back to normal. But there's some really good ones too. And I think like you say, it's nice to see it again. I haven't seen a Palpatine, so I don't know. But they maybe are saving the best for last or something.
I don't think so.
So we're one step closer to seeing Star Wars unreleased TV show after 10 years.
Yeah, so on this topic, and again, seeing what's going on here, it's kind of cool to see some of this stuff coming back. So Star Wars, under Disney's leadership, has put out a number of series, Mandalorian, of course, and there's been some other things over the years, like the
Rebels,
Clone
Bad Batch,
Ahsoka. Yeah, Ahsoka, Maul Shadow Lord, and so on.
Oh,
and,
Andor.
Andor.
Yeah.
And even Acolyte. But, the thing of it is...
What was that? Did you cough up a hairball?
I'm sorry. This is a family show. I don't dare repeat that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, it's interesting. One of the last projects that was created by George Lucas and Lucasfilm Animation was this non-canon animated parody likened to something like The Simpsons. And, which sounded very interesting.
Well, Seth Green was involved, so think about it.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, like you say, Bill. Oh, gee, so it's either going to be really good or really bad, right? So it's that kind of a thing, but it never went further, and it's looking like this is being at least talked about again. So Star Wars Detours, Lucas Museum is the one that's talking about this, and this is a whole nother topic I want to cover one of these weeks, because it would be something very interesting to look at, and it's something that is also getting off the ground. We've talked about it in the past. But, we may need to do a pilgrimage to that.
I think that would be really cool, because
I think it's important. If we're going to cover things, we need to go see it in person.
Well, if George Lucas and his family are putting together this museum, then you know what? It might be worth going down there to take a look.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I'm led to understand this is in LA, right? Or that area.
I think it's somewhere in LA. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, anyway, they are actually having public screenings of select Star Wars Detours episodes there. So this is a thing. And, and like you say, Seth Green confirmed that at San Diego Comic-Con this year. So yeah, it'd be something kind of fun to check out. I'm glad to see this coming back. One of the biggest things about Star Wars, a lot more than most other cultures and, things like that, is the fact that it is very fan-oriented. At least it always used to be. You had the costume clubs, you had all kinds of things. You had canon, you had non-canon, you had, a lot of involvement. And it was a thing that really integrated everybody. There wasn't a limitation to who could participate and what and all of that kind of stuff.
Do you guys remember the really cool pictures that there? All right, this was about 10 years ago on Twitter and some of the other, I think Facebook. There were these artists who were making these amazing photographs. They would set up the 6-inch figures and make these amazing pictures of action scenes.
Right.
And then, bam, they just disappeared. Like a lawyer came and crushed them. I don't know what happened to these people. I'm sure there's a story, and if somebody knows about it, maybe they can share that with us.
Let us know in the comments on YouTube or here at userfriendly.show, because we'd love to find out what happened. But I would be, if I was a betting man, and I am, I would be willing to say that you probably have hit the nail right on the head there with lawyers showing up or something akin to that,
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what stifles creativity in a lot of these cases.
Definitely. Okay, so off in a different direction, tiny and visible drones have been developed. Tell us about this.
This is one that had an Instagram video attached, and not that there's ever fake information on Instagram. I did want to check it out, though, to see what was going on here. But I think we're taking a little bit of artistic license with that headline. There's, giant asterisk attached. We're not dealing with anything that's using, space age cloaking technology or something like that. However, that being said, it is kind of cool and it is a real thing. So what they've done is they've made a drone and basically done the engineering on it so that it spins in a certain way that it will not allow your eye to lock on a certain part of it. So while you can see something whirling around, so it's not invisible in that respect, but it is definitely really kind of unique in the way that this is done. So now, Gretchen, you saw the video. What do you think of it?
I thought it was fascinating, and I'm like, okay, is this real or is this fake? And I could see how possibly something moving in a certain fashion could possibly make it so it was difficult to see. So, I just wanted your opinion, and I thought it was kind of a cool concept.
See if we can get one of these. So, Bill, in your opinion, Full Metal Jacket or even Halo, the direction we're going with warfare, what do you think? Do we need invisible drones?
I think it's just evolution of warfare.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And I will say one thing about it, and this is a little bit of an aside on this story, but we do get a lot of comments and on this is, people being concerned about the direction that's going with technology. But I will tell you one thing, it'd be better if we didn't have to have war, obviously. But that doesn't seem to be an option. So when you look at modern warfare, the groups that are using technology for frontline, with robotics and drones and unmanned vehicles and all the different things like that, the casualties are so much lower than what you would see in normal warfare, especially with this kind of thing. So it does have a positive in that direction, just as long as it's on a side that, I can support. So there you are.
The TikTokification of Disney Plus and concerns about the future of animation.
All right, so Creative Blog reporting on this. Where do I start with this? They're firing their creators and their animators in favor of having TikTok creators make shorts that they can put on Disney Plus. That's essentially what's going on here.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So under the headline of what could possibly go wrong with that, it just seems like, okay, so we're going to allow for intellectual property rights for TikTok creators. Like, I don't think I have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. But we're getting rid of the animators and writers and things in the process of doing this.
So you're getting rid of the professionals?
Basically, yeah.
That seems kind of crazy.
I don't know, Bill, what's your opinion? I mean, in all honesty, this seems, I don't know.
Well, it's dumb. And if I recall correctly, it also is that they're using a lot of AI tools, quotes, to allow for this to happen. So,
official statement from Disney is they're going to bring a thoughtfully curated Disney-centric fan-created content from TikTok to the Disney Plus app, specifically to its new VERTS, V-E-R-T-S, vertical mobile feed.
Okay. Well, you don't see me getting excited about that.
No, I don't.
All right.
Disney goes on to say fans will enjoy a shared Disney experience with TikTok videos that will be refreshed regularly to engage subscribers more deeply in timely fan conversations, building stronger communities, and ultimately helping them engage with more story formats. No, that does not sound like corporate speak at all.
Yeah, I think Disney's lost the plot.
I think they're kind of unwieldy and huge. They need to divide themselves up a little bit and give people focus. Like a leader that's in charge of just one thing and that they love it and want to care for it. That's just my opinion. Okay, HBO alters Harry Potter series footage following a backlash.
So the direct reporting on this, David Thompson wrote this, and what we're looking at here is something that we actually did cover earlier in the year.
Yep.
And HBO is reworking their upcoming Harry Potter reboot, at least the new streams and different things that have been put out on the trailers for this, because people reacted in a way that's saying it's gotten very dark. And in my opinion, it did.
Yeah.
It was to a point of almost being, why bother with color? What did the film noir, I think is how you say that? Noir. Okay, yeah. I knew I was saying the word wrong. But it was getting, to that point, and that's not Harry Potter.
No.
So the Direct posted some before and after shots from the original trailer and what they're showing now. And it actually does make a huge difference. You can actually see details in the background. You can see, the faces of the people, which is kind of important for television.
There was a scene where I think Harry was in the the chemistry lab, the potions lab, and he's sitting there all alone in the dark. And then when they cleaned it up, there's a kid behind him.
Yeah, that's about how the difference
and it was like, wow, why did she bother even being there and being excited about having the job if they were going to put her in a dark, cave?
Right.
So, and this is so much better. I saw the pictures, and I think it's an improvement.
All right. SpaceX's Falcon 9 wasn't the first rocket to crash into the moon.
So Space.com reporting this. Robert Perlman is the writer of this. And what we're talking about here is something that's been in the news. It's been widely reported. Falcon 9 upper stage collided with the moon on last week, Wednesday. And it seems like the way that this was going is this was the first time this has ever happened, and it hasn't. We've been seeing this a lot of times. SpaceX just had some part that was unintentional, in addition to this one. And there's been a lot of other things like this where there's been some tests that have been specifically done on purpose to crash something into the moon to kind of see what would happen. So we see this going back to the Apollo era. So nothing new or anything like that. And one of the more interesting comments, somebody made the comment that if you did this, it was going to either sink into the moon or cause it to shoot out a chunk back to the Earth or something. I don't completely remember what the comment was, but none of these things happen, although it is true.
Actually, if you've watched the really, really old video of something hitting the moon, it gets stuck in the moon's eye. Do you guys remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that
black and white film.
I
do
like
remember
long
that
time
video,
ago.
Yes.
Was it 1920s or something?
It would probably have been, and that would have upset the moon god. So, it's, no, that doesn't happen, although it is a real thing that when they first Apollo program being about this and the studies for that, there was a concern that you were going to sink into the sand.
Oh, okay.
And at the time, we didn't know, but back then it was, you wouldn't want to get sucked into quicksand or some equivalent of that on the moon. That would make for a very bad day. But no, that obviously didn't happen. And as we're going forward now, some of these things are done unintentionally, like the SpaceX stuff, or intentionally to see what would happen and why and what, the reaction to things would be and that kind of stuff.
So was crashing into the moon a bonus for them? Because I know that was their big thing about the last time their ships exploded.
Well, I mean, actually getting out of orbit would have already been anyway. No.
Speaking of more space stuff, want a chance to speak with the astronauts while they are in space?
Yeah, so this is a cool thing. So while they're sinking into the sand, you can talk to them, right? Now,
no, anyway. they're not on the moon. They're floating around in the space station.
So, just really quickly on this, because we've been covering some of the STEM stuff from NASA, and we've been asked where to go for this. It's stemgateway.nasa.gov. So that's the URL to get to NASA STEM programs, including this. And this is a program where you can sign up with priority given to educational institutions and that type of a thing. There's a process of what you have to do to get involved in this, where you can actually get an uplink to an astronaut while they're in space. And questions about this can go to jsc-downlink@mail.nasa.gov. But go ahead and check out stemgateway.nasa.gov for all of the details on this and a lot of other STEM programs that NASA offers.
So after a very long run, because this is the longest running series, I think, The Simpsons might be ending.
It is, and this is something, though, that I've heard a couple of times over the past few years when people are going, how much longer is The Simpsons going to be around? Because now we're, millennials? And when that started, it would have been, I don't know, what generation was that, 89, Gretchen? You know this stuff.
Yeah, sometime in the late 80s. Yeah.
But what generation was the late 80s?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, that's not where I am too. Well, anyway, on that topic,
I'm Gen X. All I care about is my group.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's more of a baby boomer attitude.
Baby boomer. Yeah, okay. And if for everybody typing comments about that, we earned it. All right. Create a blog reporting on this. Joe Foley wrote this, and this comes from an interview with Nancy Catt right now. She, of course, is the voice of Bart.
Mm-hmm.
And
she's been doing it for a long time.
Well, has been doing it for going on 40 years. And she's saying that she doesn't know this for sure, but they have the rights to produce through the 40th season, which is about 2029. So that still would give us a couple more years. And they are coming out with a second Simpsons movie, which I did not know until I saw this article. Okay. So, that'll be interesting to see where that ends up going. But the question then becomes, how far do you go with this? Because it is something...
I've observed like the last. I did a binge watch on The Simpsons, and I've gotten towards these more recent ones, and they're not as fun and as cheerful as they used to be. I actually kind of ended watching some of it, going, "Wow, that was depressing." So I'm not sure if maybe they're tired,
I kind of would be. I mean, you get to a point where you run out of stuff to write about. Although with something like Simpsons, you have a pretty open world,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just to look at the dates right now, and this is where this does get interesting if you want to look at it in context. Homer's current birth date, in order to match up with where the characters are now, would have to be the late 80s. Right?
Oh. Okay.
Well, think about that, because if it's 40 years and he was in his 30s, that would put him at 77 or something now if you were actually doing this in a chronological order, which they're not, of course. It's a cartoon, and I know that. But, the characters don't age. But I noticed there's a screenshot of Homer with a selfie stick and a cell phone and videoing himself, and he's got a...
They're changing their clothes around sometimes, too, I've noticed. Yeah. They've changed sometimes Marge's clothes, and sometimes they changed Lisa and Bart's things, which I thought was interesting, but some of the storylines are just odd. Maybe I'm just not relating to...
Well, and maybe changes in culture and everything with that, too. So we'll see what happens.
Gladys West, mathematician whose work paved the way for GPS, dies at 95.
Yeah. Scientist who was absolutely amazing. Bill, you know a little bit about her.
Well, she was the one who came up with mathematics that allow us to use GPS, the thing that we use every day. And, people use it on their phones, and logistics use it. Ships use it.
Oh, yeah.
NASA uses it.
That's a part of daily life,
And really, if you get into it, it was a lot of calculations just to figure out how to cover, how to do a lot of different things, and how many satellites were required, how to use those satellites to coordinate, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and it's amazing what she came up with on this. An interesting little subnote on that before we close out this segment is the speed of the passage of time is different in orbit than it is on the ground, and this was one of the things that she was able to figure out.
Wow.
To be able to keep these things coordinated and what those formulas were and that type of thing. All right, well, this is User Friendly 2.0. We'll be back after the break.
Have you seen him? He's from the future. He's got a really big computer. And he uses it every day. And he uses it in every way. What's he use it for? I'm not that sure, because it uses future technology.
Welcome back. This is User Friendly 2.0. Check out our website at userfriendly.show. Send us your questions and your comments. That is the way we program our show and is what's leading up to the topic of this segment. We're going to be talking a little bit about computer memory and where that started, and computer processors and where that started as well. So, I don't know, guys, 2026, sit down and use the computer, our core processor, which is pretty much what's in everything. And I know the Macs and stuff have some of their own variations on what they're using, but the point of it is, at the end of the day, it's pretty much 64-bit. You have a lot of memory. You have, some various different things. There's multiple cores in the processors and all that kind of stuff, and that's pretty standard. You even go buy a cheap laptop or something that's a couple $100, and you're looking at processing power of that. and it's a commodity. But this certainly didn't start this way. And when you start looking back at the history of these things, it's kind of cool. So early computers, like really early computers, 1940s and that type of thing, you didn't have memory. There certainly weren't memory chips, but you also didn't have memory in the context of what we do now. So if you wanted your very large, very expensive computer that usually was vacuum tubes and size of a large room or more, to do something different, you couldn't program it to do that. You had to physically rewire the circuits in it to allow for it to change what it was doing. So this obviously was a limitation, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of having some way where the computer could remember something, bits of information, whatever, it would need to do, was something that they started to experiment with. And where this started was something called a mercury delay line. And you sent a pulse through a tube that was literally filled with mercury. When the pulses reached the other end, electronics detected them and sent them back through the tube again. And this had to keep going on so that it didn't dissipate. So it would circulate it through mercury. I could see that as being somewhat difficult in modern computers.
Uh-huh.
So you consider each tube was 1 bit. And so this would add up to a lot of mercury and definitely a lot of equipment required to do that in any kind of a reasonable thing. But it was the first step in actually having the computer be able to remember something. And,
That's
so
weird.
another early technology was called the Williams tube, which used a cathode ray tube, similar to what's in an old television picture tube to store information electronically. But again, while this worked, both of these technologies worked. I mean, there's no question about that, but they weren't exactly ideal for building smaller, more reliable computers. So that led us into the first really kind of industrial produced memory called magnetic core. And I'd love to get an example of this somewhere out there. These things were used from the 50s and 60s. And basically what you did is you had tiny magnetic rings called cores. Wires were threaded through the rings, and the direction of the magnetation could represent a binary 1 or 0. So again, it worked. But there was a caveat to this. They had to be manufactured by hand.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, there is not a viable process to do this with a machine. So you would end up in a situation here where workers, frequently women, because of the precision involved, threaded incredibly fine wires through the microscopic magnetic cores. Some of these were used in spacecraft, like the Apollo guidance computer. And again, it worked, but as they were trying to get things smaller, which made the cores smaller, you had the workers with microscopes trying to see what they were doing. And of course, this became problematic. And,
Yeah, I'm envisioning people in what do they call clean rooms, probably avoiding dust. Because if you're using something really small, getting a wad of dust into something is going to make it.
Well, yeah, and and it's interesting because the idea of a clean room didn't really exist yet. In fact, one of the first places where they made memory, which I believe was Intel, was in an old factory in the Silicon Valley area that did fruit processing. And they bought this building and started using it. And it's like, this wasn't exactly a clean room.
Yeah.
Okay, it was more the opposite of a clean room, what we would think of today.
It was a moldy room.
A moldy room. It's just, you think about the differences and stuff. Now, one thing about core memory, though, very early on, it was non-volatile, so it worked like a flash drive. You could turn the computer off and it wouldn't lose its magnetic charge.
Okay.
So when you turned it back on, the information was still there.
So the information is all stored because of magnetics?
Yeah, because of the charge of the magnetic cores.
Okay.
Now, you get a magnet near that, I think it would cause some problems.
Yeah, remember, we used to be told don't put a magnet on your computer, and keep magnets away from your computer.
During that era, it was different technology, of course. It was the same basic ideas. So in the 1960s, semiconductor technology was thought about as something that could replace magnetic cores. But there was a lot of, from the corporate world, a resistance to this because it's like, well, we have this and it works and it might not be great. And it's not something we want to invest in another technology that may not work. So in 1968, two scientists, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, the author of Moore's Law later, left Fairchild Semiconductor and founded a new little company. You might have heard of it. It was called Intel, or Integrated Electronics. I bet you didn't know that was an acronym. So,
but it sounds like a word, so it works.
Yeah, there you are. And the other thing that's interesting about Intel is they started out not manufacturing CPUs, but memory. That was the first stuff that came out of Intel. And one of their first products was something called the 3101. Of course, we all have to have numbers for everything, at least, for a while. And it was introduced in 1969. And the 3101 led on to the next piece of equipment called the 1103 DRAM, which was released in 1970. And it stored 1 byte or 1024 bits or 128 bytes of memory. So not kilobytes, not megabytes, certainly not gigabytes, but bytes. And just to give you an idea, a modern photograph, to store it, would require tens of thousands of those chips for one picture.
Mm-hmm.
You put it in that context. But it was the start of what is modern memory, and it put core memory out of the computer industry within a couple of years.
So what exactly did they use these machines for? Was it mostly just high-end mathematics?
Actually, that's an interesting question. It actually leads into another part of what we're going to be talking about here in a little bit, Gretchen, but I'm going to answer the question because it does fit together very well. And that was where microprocessors started. So your question is, what did they use this type of thing for? Well, early computers would have been like your mainframes and supercomputers, these kind of things in the day. Again, the Apollo computers, stuff like that, right?
But what were they doing? What was their job?
Well, in the case of
Are
the
they
Apollo
just doing mathematics?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Primarily. And again, to answer that question, because it gives you the idea of where things were going with this, Intel invented what's called the 4004, which was the first programmable microprocessor a few years later. And it was an accident that this came from. So what were they doing with it? Well, there was a calculator company, Asian calculator company, that hired Intel to make chips for a calculator. Now, in that era, an electronic calculator, or really any device like that, did not use a microcontroller. It used what was TTL logic. And basically what it was is they had chips that were specifically designed to do whatever that calculator was going to do. So if later they wanted a different version of the calculator, they designed specifically different chips for it. So Intel came up with the idea, well, what if we, instead of doing this specific, expensive to develop, expensive to produce design, a chip that could be told what to do? And that's where the first processor came from. So yes, mathematics, because they were used in calculators, is the first really consumer product that came out of this.
So this actually tells us where the name of these devices came from. I have a laptop computer.
Yeah.
So to compute. And that's the origin of the name of these devices we use.
Right.
Yeah. Because we're doing things now with them, doing artwork and sharing pictures and writing novels or letters or whatever. But their original purpose was just to compute.
Yeah. And in a sense, it still is what it's doing, although it can do a whole lot more, but you're still computing binary bits.
Oh, yeah.
To this day. And, we're getting into quantum computers now, which is different. But for what you see out there uses the same technology. It goes back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it's better. And Moore's Law, again, the number of transistors on a chip will basically double every 2 years, which has been held true, is what drives the fact that we can do so much more now. But it's the same basic technology. And along the lines of what you were talking about, Gretchen, there is circling back to memory, the DRAM, which is what we have now. Dynamic Random Access Memory is what that stands for. Okay. So unlike core memory, it was one that when you turned the computer off, you lost what was in it. So it's RAM instead of, non-volatile memory, dynamic RAM. And again, it has an enormous advantage, and we're stepping up, in time as things are going on, because you could pack more and more onto the silicon. So in other words, the same number of chips were snowballing into a thing where you had more and more memory being available. So kilobits led to megabits, megabits led to gigabits, and that's where we're at now. So you take this and you start looking at the idea of home computing, okay? So memory was expensive, even in this format. You go late 70s, that type of a thing, and you start having things like home video game consoles, the Atari VCS 2600, the Fairchild Channel F, early computers like the Apple II, as an example, or the Commodore VIC-20, all had very small amounts of memory because it was so expensive to put it in there, you know? I should know this off the top of my head. The Atari 2600 is like 4K, I think, or something like that. It might even be a little bit less. And so what you're dealing with is something that you do not have a lot of room to work on. And then that's when things like the Commodore 64 came out, and later 128, where you had 64K of RAM, 128K of RAM. These were just felt like you had infinite space to be able to do what you're doing. An interesting little side note to it is the amount of memory is so little that most Atari 2600 games, the original ones, you can actually fit on a QR code, which I thought was interesting. But, you know, you look at where all of this came from and where it's built out from there, and that's where this came. So anyway, so that's your memory. And we started to talk about processors because this obviously one was driving the other. And the 4004 was, among other things, a 4-bit processor. So memory or processor capability is expressed in bits, and it's a multiple. So you had 4-bit, 8-bit, 16, 32, 64-bit. There is 128-bit, but 64 is pretty much the standard that's used these days. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, the Intel 4004 had 2,300 transistors on the silicon. Okay. And the Apple M1, a modern thing, let's see, how many zeros is that? 16 billion transistors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 16 billion transistors. Okay, so that's a difference. You know, think about Moore's Law and it building out there. I'm getting a funny look, Bill. Did I do my math wrong on that?
No, I think you're right.
Okay. So anyway, you know, math is hard sometimes, right? But it just gives you an idea of where things are going with that kind of thing. So what happens is you can make things smaller, the performance becomes better, the amount of electrical consumption goes down. You wouldn't know that with some of the modern data centers and some of the problems that we're experiencing with that, but that's because you have a lot of silicon in these places. Can you imagine, I know it wouldn't be possible mathematically, but trying to build a modern data center on a 4-bit CPU?
No.
So what does this actually play into? Well, you've got a couple of different things. The amount of memory you can use on a given processor is limited by how much memory the processor can address. So in the example of a 4-bit 4004 processor, again, these were used for calculators. And that processor could handle your digits 0 through 9, operands, a few instruction sets, but that was it. So what drove going to an 8-bit processor was the need to be able to have letters. So a company comes out and they're building a terminal that needs to support upper and lowercase character sets, symbols, control characters for moving your cursor around, that kind of a thing on a 4-bit processor. That simply wasn't possible. There just wasn't enough horsepower for it. So that is what drove to an 8-bit processor and has continued to drive the development of technology, is the need to be able to do more. And you had some other things in there too. As somebody that I've worked on some games for retro computers and that type of a thing, and being a modern programmer and then going and programming in a assembly language instruction sets for a 64K computer, you really learn to appreciate what early programmers went through.
Well,
because
didn't they? Weren't the letters assigned the binary, a huge binary name? Each letter had a binary, you know, like the ones and zeros.
Ultimately, yeah, it's expressed by a binary value. Now, most machines have a character set that uses a numeric value. ASCII is the one that PCs are based on. PETSCII is what Commodores were based on. But anyway, what all of these things are is a way to get from the binary to human readable characters.
Right. So they had to assign these weird number combinations to get the readable letters.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, and all of these type of things take up memory, take up space. So I know one of the tricks that I play with, and a lot of programmers do on these older things, is something called bank switching. So let's say you have your Commodore 64, your Atari XE, whatever, an 8-bit computer like that. The maximum amount of memory it can address completely, even theoretically, is not a lot. 128K on some go a little bit more. So what happens if you need more memory than that? Well, in some cases, you are just out of luck, or you come up with things like bank switching. So unknown to the processor in your cartridge or something, you have logic that's able to swap the memory, active memory, out and put different stuff in the memory that the processor can access, and do this in real time. So that's how you started to get some better looking technologies. One system that really did this was the old 8-bit Nintendo, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And that ran off of a 6502 processor, which is the same processor that's in your Commodore, Apple, Atari computers in the day. And they got creative with the way that they were able to do things. And they had some instruction sets and things like that in there to be able to make that function in real time. So you could get some really impressive output from these machines, even though the base technology and what it was originally started as probably couldn't, really support that. Memory upgrades were another thing. The Atari 2600, which is it's a retro video game machine, but a lot of people hold it in kind because that's what a lot of people grew up with in that era. By today's standard, is extremely basic. I mean, you look at, you're building 4K, your cartridges, you could make the cartridges bigger as the ROMs in them got bigger, but at the end of the day, it was very limited what you could do. And some of these programmers were amazing in some of the tricks they would use and that type of a thing. But then I've seen on these same systems something that looks as good as an early Nintendo. And one of them is a system to where you could use a tape recorder with your Atari 2600. So the cartridge slot had a thing that plugged into it, and it plugged into the tape recorder. And digging into it, well, this add-on also added something like 20 times more memory than what was in the base unit. So of course you could do something that looked a lot better. And you ended up using the Atari console basically as the video and audio controls and the joysticks and that, but the actual horsepower of it mostly was moved to the cartridge that you plugged into it, And Starcast Star something was the name of that. And it was definitely something that, you had these tricks that you could really make things look a lot better. So as those things built out, you could do more, and yet to today, where I have what's by today's standards about 4-year-old Dell Alienware machine, and I have a love it, hate it relationship with it. When it works, I do like it. I just wish that was more often than not. But the thing of it is in there, I have 128 gigs of RAM. Now, I'm not going to give anybody the address of where this computer is, and I do have armed guards at the house to protect that memory at today's prices. But at the end of the day, that kind of a concept, and I was looking this up, would have exceeded all of the memory that was installed in all of the computers that were sold in the early 80s total. Not maybe including your mainframes or other computers like that, but just your general office or home computing environments. This one machine would exceed all that by a lot. So it is interesting to look at kind of where the comparison of these things go,
Well, okay, if you want to do the comparison, the digital watches that we had in high school, this is the 1980s, had more computing power than they had to go to the moon in that little wristwatch, the digital watch. So things were rapidly changing.
And we take it for granted today. Can you imagine going back to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, in the days of the Apollo missions, and handing the engineers there a very basic smartphone, like one of the cheap ones we don't keep, and you buy them as a throwaway phone now?
They'd be
shocked.
shocked.
They'd look at something like that going, what in the...
Yeah.
They'd be thinking, oh my gosh, you got the Star Trek stuff for real.
Or they think we visited the aliens and we're getting them the technology from them or something, because it's flat screens, which the idea of that has existed since the 80s, but they weren't able to manufacture them at any kind of scale. In the 70s, you didn't have that yet. It would have been CRT. No. So you have this flat device, which is in full color. So even with CRTs going into the late 80s, you had 16 colors, 64 colors, maybe. And you're looking at 16 million colors on a handheld device that's able to compute all of the world's information in your hand. Yeah, that would have made a difference.
It would have been a shocker.
So,
it really would have. Yeah.
And it's interesting. And one of the other things I learned about doing some research for this that I didn't know is the whole idea of a math coprocessor or a floating point unit. So in early, let's take a look at the IBM 8086 systems, Intel IBM.
Do you
So
remember the gateways? They used to make a big deal about having a math coprocessor in
and
them.
the gateways were an 8086 based system. All of that was
Okay.
PC clones. Your gateways, your Packard Bell, your Compaq, even core processors have their origin in that type of technology. And the instruction set, so a CPU has an instruction set where you can tell it to do specific things. And the instruction sets on a lot of these, including the 6502, did not have the ability to multiply or divide. So you could add or subtract. If you wanted to multiply or divide, you had to write software to do it, which of course took up space in your memory and processor cycles and that type of a thing. So you were like 20 clock cycles to perform one operation in multiplication. Well, if you had a program like VisiCalc, which is an early version of something like Excel, updating all these cells in a spreadsheet, that kind of a thing would take forever to run because you did not have hardware-based implementation. That's what a math coprocessor basically is. It adds the ability to multiply or divide on an instruction set level at the hardware. Now, of course, all that's built in the modern processors today, but the cost of doing this required extra pins, extra, silicon, all of that kind of a thing, which turned into money, which is why they didn't do it. But it was just weird because one of the games I was working on, I needed multiplication capability for something I was doing. Didn't realize this and going, wait, there's no instruction to multiply? No, there's no instruction to multiply. And that's one of the things, like your TI calculators were a big deal because they had specialty designed hardware that could do all of this. So a scientific calculator, trying to run that on a 6502 processor or early 8086 based technology, just you could do it if you had enough memory, but you would, some of the instructions for things like VisiCalc told you, okay, when you're going to do this calculation, go work on something else for the next 2 hours. And that was in the manual.
Yeah, I remember when getting a TI 35, I think is what we needed for our chemistry class. And it was like, ooh, that was like big fancy tech, so.
And they were programmable, some of them too. I know that was a big deal.
I didn't have one of those.
When I was in college, I was able to put formulas, into some of these things and it would remember them. And we had laptops and stuff at that point and you could get a math coprocessor. I just hadn't hit the lottery and was, trying to pay for college as best as I could. So affording something like that was not really in the cards. And I remember I went to a garage sale and find this TI calculator that somebody had broken the screen on. And this just goes to show it was like $200 to repair the screen in it, and it was worth every penny. And I ended up with this thing that was just I still have it. It just worked so well, and it was amazing and like just a real luxury.
I still have mine buried somewhere. If I find it, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of those people. I collect weird things, and some of them big, like arcade cabinets, but I do love calculators. And I've got a collection, and I don't think I have one of those. But I definitely would love to see it. If you find it, Gretchen, you might find that it will have to be taken by eminent domain for this show or something.
Oh, it's got a red screen.
Yeah, I'll live with that. That's actually something, just in our few seconds here we've got left, that we're going to be reviewing. A listener sent in a Virtual Boy. And after playing with this a little bit, just, have your Excedrin migraine on hand and you can actually use the system a little bit. Oh boy. So we're going to be talking about some consoles and stuff coming up here too. And again, this is answering a lot of your questions. Keep them coming in. Userfriendly.show is the place to send them. We'd love to hear from you. And until next week, this is User-Friendly 2.0, keeping you safe on the cutting edge.
User-Friendly 2.0, copyright 2013 to 2026 by User-Friendly Media Group, Incorporated. All rights reserved. The content is the opinion of the show's participants and does not necessarily reflect this station or platform. Requests for material use, interviews, disclosures, and other correspondence may be viewed and submitted at userfriendly.show.